Welcome to the Bowden Blitz SEC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, the SEC left out of the College Football National Championship yet again. The Ole Miss Rebels lost in the semifinal playoff game against the Miami Hurricanes. Game went right down to the wire. Trinidad, Chambliss, and the Rebels had an opportunity to pull it out. Hail Mary went for naught. They lose it 31-27. Give me your thoughts about that game playing out last week, and is, in fact, the SEC not the best conference in college football?
Well, I think the SEC is right there on the edge, and I think every team, or at least the main teams in the SEC, and you can go from Alabama, Georgia, to LSU, to Texas A&M, if you aren't playing for the SEC championship or the national championship, their fans aren't totally happy. So they are paying the kind of money to put them into championship games, and right now they haven't quite enough. It starts with the quarterback. I don't care what league or what conference you're in. It always starts, to me, do you have the best quarterback who can build your team around that, just as Indiana has built their team around Mendoza. I think that's where it starts in the SEC, and that's where you're seeing coaches jockey for next position. But if they're going to get themselves to the championship game next year, it's not just going to be about overall talent. It's also going to be who's got the best guy that can pull the trigger and lead that offense and lead that football team. Because remember, half the plays in a football game start out in the hands of the quarterback. That's critical to remember, because that's the guy that has the greatest chance to win or lose a football game.
Now, Austin Simmons, the man that was supposed to be the lead dog for the Rebels, transferred out of the program this week. We saw Trinidad Chambliss be denied a 6th year of eligibility, but his lawyers will be appealing that decision. It looks like at least favorable from some reports that Trinidad Chambliss will be able to play college football next season. If that's the case, that has to benefit Ole Miss and the Ole Miss program as a whole. But I do want to take a look at the coaching perspective, because now Lane Kiffin is solidified in Baton Rouge. Charlie Weiss Jr. moves on. From what you saw so far in an interim basis with Pete Golding, this is still a tough ship to really elevate to where they got this year. He took over the program after that train was in motion. Going to be very difficult to get back on top in 2026.
Yeah, most of the jobs I took over 6 different universities. They were losing programs, and you only had one way to go up. And so you love that. But here's that Ole Miss coming off their greatest 5-year run in history, and Golding has to improve upon that or keep them there. And he loses his quarterback. Now, the good thing for them, because of the losing the waiver, if Chambliss were to win late, he pretty much, I think, would almost have to stay where he is at Ole Miss, and that's in their favor. If he'd have gotten a release quickly through the portal, I could see a lot of teams paying a lot of money to get him somewhere else, and so that might go to their favor. But I will say this, I think Golding has proven himself. Ole Miss has proven they can win without Lane Kiffin, but I think maybe the biggest recruit Golding's got to have is the offensive coordinator. I mean, I think Charlie Weiss Jr. has proven he is a big-time play caller, because I watched that closely, and I think he really was a big factor in the way the offense at Ole Miss went. And so that'll be Golding's next big recruit for the offensive coordinator position.
Yeah, from the recruiting aspect, not just coordinators and staff, but the JUCO and obviously the transfer talent, that's where Lane Kiffin maybe had the eye to see the quarterbacks and the skilled talent from an offensive perspective that fit the scheme. For Golding being a defensive guy, it's going to be up to the coordinator, right? Whoever he does hire to make that decision or maybe recommendation, hey, we need this guy in our program because he elevates us to a certain level, right? That's the one thing I think you would give the advantage to Kiffin way over Golding in that type of situation or circumstance.
Well, and we already think Deuce Knight from Auburn, I think, has made his commitment to go to Ole Miss. And he's a little more of a dual threat than, Trinidad Chambliss, although he could scramble well, he was a pocket quarterback. He liked to throw out of the pocket. Deuce Knight right now, I think at his early stage of his career, is going to be a dual threat quarterback that you build a little more into the running game. Now you've got an offensive coordinator that you've got to have one that can develop an offense with that quarterback in mind, that particular talent in mind. And it kind of reminds you of Gus Malzahn and the type of quarterback he needs to have. You need to match that quarterback and that coordinator so their style goes together, much like you see with the new head coach at Auburn. He brings over his quarterback from South Florida, and they're already on the same page. So, again, very important as you're building a program, and nobody gets any waiting time. It's not like, okay, we may mess up this year, but we'll get it right the year after. No, they're expecting you to get the right coordinator, the right quarterback that fits that style, and get on with the winning without a bunch of learning curve, without losing going into that point where you start winning again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing, too, whether or not Trinidad Chambliss is in Oxford next year, to get Deuce Knight, who's basically going to be a freshman again, right? Because he left, right. I believe, he didn't burn his red shirt. So he, from an eligibility standpoint, he's still a freshman. He's raw, but he's tall. Coach, I didn't think he was 6'4", 217. He's a big frame kid, and he's mobile, and you could build around that player for maybe 2 or 3 seasons, especially if he fits with your new offensive coordinator. The fact that Auburn wasn't able to keep him because Byron Brown has committed there from USF, that's a huge loss to Alex Golish and the Tigers.
Yeah, I don't think you could. He wants to play, and I think, and Ole Miss is willing to pay for money, and I like him. He's kind of like that quarterback at Arkansas. He's tall, and he can run, and he's lanky, and he can throw the football. And if they were able to get Chambliss back another year, I think he'd be willing to sit and play and start 4 more years after that. And so I think that's kind of what they're thinking about. They can now go fight much as they can because I think they have a very good quarterback. But I remember I was there in the Mercer game where he played a lot. I was there honoring our 93 team, and he is raw. He just kind of running around like a young pup, and so there's a great future for him, but I don't know if he goes out there with the poise that Trinidad Chambliss had. Trinidad Chambliss came in after winning the national championship at Ferris State, and he came in with incredible poise under pressure, and played like a veteran to me. And I think Deuce Knight still has some growing to do, but he's got the right program and he's got the right future, I think, at Ole Miss.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see exactly how Ole Miss handles the transfer portal. We'll see how they attack recruiting. It's going to be very intriguing to see the best season in Ole Miss history to be basically 30 seconds from a national championship game is unreal and unbelievable. And that's a testament to that interim staff. It's a testament to what Trinidad Chambliss brought that program. And it just shows you, Coach, in today's landscape of college football, anything can happen with the right recruiting class and, more importantly, the right coach.
That's right. There is no question. I think what we've seen with what's happened at Ole Miss, what's happened at Texas Tech, Miami's resurgence, Indiana now dominating. We've got an example of the portal transfer. NIL has given everybody a chance to step up, and not just step up over time, but very, very quickly.
It does. When we come back, Coach and I will take a look at LSU. They got some transfer talent in this week. We'll talk about Lane Kiffin. Can he get that train rolling in 2026 to not just get LSU back to potentially a 10-win football season, but in year number 1, can he crack the college football playoff in Baton Rouge? That would be the odds, and that would be the expectation in 2026 for Coach Bowden. I'm Joe Lisi, coming right back with more SEC talk right here on the Bowden Blitz. All right, back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden talking all things SEC. We left off talking about Ole Miss's loss in the college football playoff, big picture as well for 2026 with Golding and the crew. Can they get back? We'll see. Only time will tell. For their former coach, Lane Kiffin, he took over the reins in Baton Rouge. He got a big-time quarterback, Sam Levitt from Arizona State, coach, committed this week in Death Valley. That is a huge addition to that offense. This is a battle-tested quarterback playing in the Big 12. Did knock off Texas Tech this year. One of the top defenses, as you know, in college football. Led them on a game-winning drive in Tempe. But he's battle-tested, has played in the college football playoff. And if anybody can get the most out of a quarterback, has to be Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin with Charlie Weiss, I think they are the right position for Sam Levitt, who many think was the best quarterback in the draft. I did like Hoover, who went to Indiana, the quarterback from TCU. I think they got a great one at Indiana. But Sam Levitt, I think most people would say, if you're going to get one that's ready to take you to an SEC championship game or into the playoffs, they've got that box checked at LSU with that quarterback. And I'm sure they now can go out there just like they did with Trinidad Chambliss, and find me a backup that just is good enough that maybe a diamond in the rough, or maybe you bring one up through high school that way. But the one thing Lane Kiffin does bring to the table at LSU, he has got that cocky confidence and that polish of talking to kids in the portal, that NIL, and getting them to come join his pursuits there at LSU. So I do think he'll get a good mix out of the portal, and it starts with a great quarterback.
It looks like both running backs, Harlan Berry and Caden Durham, both are coming back as well. Those players were potentially in the portal. They got them to stay. Those are two young running backs. You know, Caden Durham and Harlan Berry. Harlan Berry was only a freshman last year. Caden Durham, obviously now going to be a junior. His ability and his experience should be perfect in that Lane Kiffin offense. But I do want to ask about the quarterback position, because we see Deuce Knight, mobile guy. We see Trinidad Chambliss and the success. Sam Levitt, another mobile core. How important is it when you're looking at a big picture in terms of elevating a program to have a quarterback that can not just run it, but throw it as well? To have that mobility is an added dimension that I think goes often unnoticed when we talk about the elite programs in college football.
Well, I mean, listen, I don't think you can overdo it. I think the consensus among people is if they find one out there, they would hope they find a dual threat guy. But I don't think of Mendoza as being a dual threat quarterback. He's an NFL pocket quarterback. And so many times there's a lot of really good dual threats, and they take their teams a long way. But that guy who knows how to be a quarterback, who has a great football IQ, that doesn't take sacks but dumps it off, and when he has to scramble, he can. But I don't think you definitely need a guy that you run the power read with, and you run the counter with the quarterback running the football off tackle. I don't think you have to be that team, and I think Indiana is an example of that. But I tell you, I think if you could have your druthers and you're going to build an offense, you'd like to have a quarterback that can run and throw and be a dual threat, if not just to be a major part of your rushing attack, to extend plays and make plays, continue to give a play a chance to have success. And nobody did that better to me than Trinidad Chambliss this year, of extending plays with his legs, although he was a guy that necessarily wasn't built into the running game.
Let's take a look at Alabama, because Ty Simpson will enter the NFL draft. Where are they going right now? Kalen DeBoer, back-to-back 4-loss seasons. He lost 2 years ago in the bowl game to Michigan. He beats Oklahoma and then loses to Indiana in just dominating fashion, 38-3, worst bowl loss in Alabama history for the most part over the last 30 years or so. When you just look at this team, I don't even know, Coach, if there's that much of a foundation. We used to believe in Nick Saban having that train in motion and just being able to recruit, top 4 and top 5 talent. Alabama this year, from a recruiting perspective, was up there, but Indiana and some of the others showcased that they are doing it much better. Is there optimism in Tuscaloosa or more pressure on Kalen DeBoer to potentially step up and lead this team back to where Nick Saban handing them over the reins?
Yeah, I think right now there's more pressure than optimism. There's more concern because of they've gotten the label, whether it's right or wrong, of being a soft football team, not just on offense but on defense, and that's not a real good word to have to explain the type of team that you are. I think if Kalen is smart. And he has a better record than most coaches have had in their first 2 years at Alabama. But nowadays, he took over a program that was up, not down. And I would say this in the offseason, I would learn to get me a big back and I would run football just the way Alabama wants to do it. And you can win that way. Get your quarterback, build around it, but get you some hammer knockers, just like you'll see Miami maybe doing better than anybody right now. Miami is really running an FCC type of offense. I think that's what DeBoer does because people there aren't happy. They have been labeled, right or wrong, as a soft team on offense and a soft team on defense, and you'll either get fired or you'll be so miserable that you'll want to leave if things don't change.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how DeBoer and this offense and defensive staff attack the transfer portal, how they attack a game plan. And when you just look at the head coaches now in the conference, there's parity from top to bottom. The coaches that have come in, Summerall and Golish, are going to elevate both of those programs to a certain capacity. We know what Lane Kiffin could do. He certainly led Ole Miss to a college football playoff appearance. And Brent Venables, I thought, did a really nice job. It wasn't until they got exposed by Alabama. But to bring a 10-win season back to Norman is very, very solid, especially when they only had a 6.5 win total. So coaches now in the SEC really need to step up and just stop. If you don't get your team to a college football playoff, you're not looked at as successful anymore.
Yeah, and Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, these are teams with the resources and the expectations of being in the playoffs. So there is no second place. If you're getting paid like you are and you're at these programs in the SEC, you better be a top 12 team next year.
When Coach and I return, we'll talk about more transfers within the conference, coming right back on the Bowden Blitz. All right, back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi, Coach Bowden, taking a look to 2026 at some of the SEC programs that potentially could step up and maybe make some noise, not just in terms of a conference championship, but a college football playoff appearance. Coach, just want to get your thoughts about the job that Clark Lee did at Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia did finish second in the Heisman behind Fernando Mendoza. This was a team that only lost 2 regular season games to Texas and Alabama by basically a combined 14 points. When you look at the success that Clark Lee has had overall in Nashville, he's going to be there a long time. They signed him to an extension. Can Vanderbilt potentially, with or without Diego Pavia, can they get back to potentially an SEC contender? And can they make the college football playoff in the next couple of seasons?
You know, I don't know if it's popular point of view, but I give a lot of credit to not just Clark Lee, but Pavia, Diego Pavia. I mean, Clark Lee was 2-10 and 6 and 2 losing seasons, 6-7 the first 2 years, and then when Pavia got there, he won both those 2 years. Now Pavia's gone, and Diego Pavia was a generational quarterback. I thought he was a program changer. I'll be interested to see if Clark Lee can find a quarterback that can do as much as Diego Pavia did, because he was, I mean, in a lot of ways, he was their program. If they won, it was because he found a way to lead them to victory, and he was so confident, and at the end, almost so arrogant or cocky that I'll be interested to see if – I know Clark Lee loves Vanderbilt, and he has been a part of their success, but there's been a lot of coaches go to Vanderbilt, and they can have temporary success, but most of them don't feel like they can sustain it, so they move on. Clarkley's the kind of guy you hope he can. Going to have a quarterback and have to have a system that fits those type of players.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out as we inch closer to spring camp in Nashville. Another team that was on the outside looking in was Texas and Steve Sarkisian, 3 losses on the regular season. He'll say, if you ask Coach Sark, they're not going to schedule teams like Ohio State. I don't think that was the problem, Coach. Problem was they were a much better home team than they were on the road, right? They could beat teams in Austin, couldn't beat them, and struggled in very difficult road environments. When you look at this team with Arch Manning, now you're number 2 in the scheme and system, right, as a starter. Can Arch elevate this team potentially if they just have, let's just say, adequate talent and not elite talent? Could this team get to the college football playoff?
Well, first of all, I think it's almost an impossibility for Texas not to have elite talent. They picked up Cam, the quarterback from Auburn, Cam Coleman. Cam Coleman. He picked up one of the best
wide receiver. Yeah.
Picked up one of the best wide receivers in football. I think they're going to have great talent. And I was of the opinion at the end of the year, especially when they beat Michigan, that Arch Manning has now developed and matured to be that team guy that can lead his team to the championship. He wasn't there at the beginning of last season. I think he ended the season where they wanted him to be. So I see Texas, and they will have talent. They will find they have money to get the talent. And I think Arch will give them a chance. And hopefully, for their sake, they won't be ranked number 1. They'll be ranked somewhere in the top 10. But I do think Texas, because they are so committed to NIL money-wise, bringing in great talent, and with Arch Manning now maturing to a contender that he is, that they will be a much better football team next year.
Yeah, and he did the right decision. I don't think he was NFL ready, to get, one season under his belt. Now in year number 2, you would have to think sky is the limit for Arch Manning. We'll see exactly how explosive Texas is. They did struggle, Coach, to run the football in consistent games, and that's the main reason why they did lose 3 in the regular season. When they had success making the college football playoff 2 years ago, and when they lost to Ohio State, they were much more consistent with the offensive line and the running backs. We'll see how it plays out this year. I do want to ask you about your former team back in the day, goalless with Auburn. Could he turn it around in year number 1? I know you've been to a number of games this year. Can Auburn get back to respectability and, more importantly, maybe a college football playoff in the next couple of seasons?
I think they did. They did some things that I did when I went to Auburn, and we turned things around. He kept the defensive coordinator, DJ Durkin. Durkin had one of the best defenses in the conference. He's still in place. He'll be able to build on his success. He's brought his entire offensive staff from South Florida and the quarterback, and I think they are way ahead in preparation for next year. So Auburn, I think, is in place now, and a tough-minded blue-collar football coach that they're going to be back in the hunt this year.
Coach and I will be back later in the week breaking down the national championship game. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode of the Bowden Blitz.